started. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Michael Markowsky. I don't even get my own name right. You see, this is why I tell people don't fret if I say your name or mispronounce your name, because I can't get my own name right. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and I'm so excited for you guys to join me here on this bonus episode here. Today we're not going to be making a painting. We are here to celebrate all of the great artwork that you guys have made over the past few months together. And I'm so excited because I've been racing to get all of the images together. I thought, a couple hours will be plenty enough time to put this show together. And then literally up until the last second here, I'm downloading photographs that you guys have sent me. I've been kind of overwhelmed with all of the artwork that you guys have sent me, which is a great problem to have. It makes me really excited that there's so many people, this community that is formed of people who are eager to learn how to paint and to express themselves in a new way, or maybe they're coming back to it for the first time in a little while. And I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to show you all the stuff you've done. And so I had a kind of whole thing planned to do, but I haven't had a chance to get around to it because, as I said, I've been like overwhelmed with all of this material you've sent me. So we're going to sort of play it by ear a little bit here. So, wow, there's so many things I want to get to today, but I think what I want to do, and because there is so much work that you guys have sent me, I'm not going to be able to kind of dive in super deep to talk about all of them in the kind of depth that I would like to, but we'll try to get to each one and at least kind of show them on the screen, do a quick little chat about them before we move on. But what we'll do is we'll look at all of the paintings from each painting together. So when we're talking about Warhol, we'll look at all the paintings of Warhol that you guys have sent me. When we talk about Emily Carr, we'll look at all the Emily Carr paintings that you guys have sent me. And to be honest, I've only been able to go through the Facebook and Instagram messages, so I haven't even looked at if you've been tagging me on Instagram, or I haven't even got to Twitter yet, just because there's been so many messages. So I totally apologize but again, that's a good problem to have, so I apologize for anybody who sent me your stuff over Twitter. I just haven't had a chance because this is just so, I'm so excited. So where should we begin? You know what, I haven't even got a chance. All the stuff people sent me is emails too. I'm just now reminding myself that there was a few that I really wanted to show here. And in fact, you know what, I'm gonna do that, because right off the bat, there was a few things here that the way that I was like laying in bed thinking, okay, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to show this here. Oh my goodness, there's so many. Look at, oh my goodness, all of these. Wow, they just go back. It keeps going. Oh no. Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay. So where is it? Oh, more. Okay, there's still more coming in too. So I love all the new emails coming in because I have a bunch of my students that have taken my classes before. And where is this? I wanted to show a really cool. There's just so many here. Darn it. Okay, let me. My apologies. Watching somebody click through their email is definitely the least interesting way of experience watching. Okay, here we go. Let me crank this up here. the reason why I'm delaying here, because I thought this would have been a really nice way of kind of just starting us off. Let's put this right in here. Okay. So. This is the best problem to have, is so much work that I can barely get to it all. So I want to show, so we're going to start off right at the very beginning of the very first, I think it was the first class we did. The first couple classes we did, we created our color wheel. And we kind of just learned a little bit about color. We started off pretty slow, just doing a little bit of mixing. And then the second class, we did some mixing across the color wheel. And, you know, maybe not terribly the most exciting project or painting for people to get started with, but I know that when I've done this in class, often people are really surprised by the results. You know, you could tell somebody some of this stuff, but until you actually get out and the paint and you start mixing the colors, that's a whole other thing. And then people, there's a lot of like, oh, wow, I didn't realize how hard this would be, or this is a lot of fun. Why haven't I been doing this for years? So our first few were just the color wheel. And if you recall, at the very, very beginning, what we did is we made a painting of Sonia Delaunay's Dancer. And I'm going to show you guys a bunch of the paintings that you guys made based on Sonia Delaunay's Dancer. And you know what? I think what I'm going to do is not show the original painting. I'm just going to show your paintings, because I don't want to compare your painting to the original painting and talk about how you messed up and how you didn't do a good enough job, and look at, here's the genius whose painting is for sale or it's in a museum and on postcards, and then here's yours and how it didn't live up to that. Again, I always talk about while we're painting is that your painting has to live on its own, right? After a while, your painting just takes on its own life, and it doesn't need the original one in order to survive, right? So we're just going to kind of forget about where the paintings came from, and we're going to look at them as they are and evaluate them on their own terms. So with that having been said, what I want to do is here's Sherry Turner Morrison's image to start us off. So this, and if I have mine here on the very bottom of this stack, maybe I'll show you what I did here, just so we have that up and available. Because I think in many cases, what I think is really exciting for me too, is that you guys have exceeded me at times. And I think that's really cool. I mean, maybe it sounds kind of funny, but for me personally, if I can be making artwork that you guys use as the basis for your own artwork, and then you create something that's even better than that, then I think I've done my job as a teacher. So for instance, let's just move this over a little bit here. So on the left is the version that I did of this painting. All right, and you'll see that, where are we? Let's move this over here. That my version is very similar to many of the paintings that you guys have made here. I would say it's any better or worse than anything anybody else sent me. If anything, I would say that your guys' paintings tend to be a little bit more creative than mine at times, because I'm doing all this talking. So let's look at another one here. Here's Jeannie's version of this painting. You know, these are often the very first paintings that any of you have made, maybe ever or in a long time. And so it's really exciting just to see the expression and the color. And I love this painting by Sonia Delaunay for that reason. She was a super colorful person herself. Let's see. These are beautiful. You can see how the black outline really works in a number of these paintings. Beautiful color. And so there's not really much for me to say about these paintings beyond that. I think that they're really great first steps for all of us. And the way we made this painting, in all fairness, was a little bit distracted, right? We were just sort of plopping colors down as we were making our color wheel. We weren't really focused on really reproducing this painting very faithfully. In fact, what I said to people is, you know, just randomly put the paint in place while you've got it on your palette, and then afterwards you can kind of fix it up a little bit as you go. But what I'm excited about is just the quality of these results. You know, one thing we talked about is how much of the figure do we want to actually keep here, and how much of it do we want to kind of disguise a little bit. So it looks like for the most part everyone was kind of walking that line between representation and abstraction. So I'm going to show you here, this is a painting by one of our students, Charmaine, and here this is her first version of the painting. And then what's exciting is that she went back and redid this painting several months later. So she's just sent this to me like last week. And so here's the first version of her painting when we began the course. And then here's her second version of it after having done all the paintings and listened to me blab on endlessly. And when she saw this, that got me so excited, because a little bit of a hint is this is sort of what I want to do for one of our final classes, is repeat some of the very first ones. So she's already kind of jumped a bit of ahead, but this is something any one of you could do for any of the paintings we've done so far. So this is better than mine, right? So here's mine on the left, here's Charmaine's on the right, after having gone back and redone this painting, right? So her first one was very similar to mine, right, using very similar kind of approach, and then she went back and really kind of looked at the original painting by Sonia Delaunay and made some radical improvements, right? So just the choice of colors here, a lot more subtle, really, like, even if I recall the original, up here on the top of this clothing, there was sort of like the paint was sort of, in Sonia Delaunay's painting, kind of blurred a little bit, where the colors ran, and she even captured that. So this is just fantastic. That, for me, this kind of coming full circle is super satisfying. When I got that, I was like, way to go, Charmaine. It makes me so excited. Okay, so, and as I said, I'm really excited by it with all of these, right? I really like using this painting as our first painting, because it just allows us to kind of get out of the gates kind of running real fast. Okay, so let's go to our next one here. And how am I going to display this here? Okay, so here's a painting by Heidi. And again, we've got lots of the same painting here, so just going to kind of flip through them, and then I'll try to talk about them as we go here. Come on, why is it allowing me to zoom? Wow, look. Oh. So, I will also say, I'll be quite honest, is that I feel like I've also improved a lot over the course of this course. Painting all of these different paintings by all of these different artists has really challenged me to think about how I make my own paintings and how I approach painting, and really having to look carefully at some artists that I've known my whole life, or since, you know, I went to art school, and artists that I've really, really enjoyed. But it's one thing to look at it in a magazine or an art gallery and, you know, to appreciate it that way. To actually make those paintings again, especially on the fly in front of everybody, is has really forced me to look at those paintings more closely than I have ever had to before, and trying to think about how an artist makes a painting is often very different than the way that we normally look at paintings. So I also think, like, my own version of this painting, if we kind of go to a few studies we did in between there, and then we jumped to how am I going to go through all of these here? Okay, so here's the version that I did, if I can center it on the screen. Again, I think it's more interesting for me anyway to look at your paintings and look at them in relationship to my painting versus the original, because the original at this point is I think is no longer required. Okay. So one thing I think is really nice about seeing these paintings is how you guys have made your own improvements in the paintings over mine. And there's sometimes you guys just maybe accidentally make some kind of changes that I look at and feel like, wow, that's, you know, an improvement, maybe because you're going fast or you're using a color you've already mixed rather than mixing a different one. Like, look at this, for instance. You know, this color up here, this green, and maybe this is the way the photograph and the color in the photograph, maybe it is a little bit more green, but here, this painting by Joyce, I actually think this kind of really bright green, that lemon green in here, works really well. I think it actually is an improvement over the kind of a little bit more of a darker kind of almost a little bit of a pastel kind of, this quite leached out some of the colors in my painting, whereas it looks like many of you guys have a little bit brighter artwork. Again, here, look at this painting by Jeannie. Same sort of thing. The table brightened up significantly, and the blue of the table a little bit closer to like an ultramarine. And so I think it's fantastic. I love to see how you guys, the variations that you guys make in these paintings. Right? And then in Heidi's case, simplifying the background. Beautiful. These are really gorgeous. Again, you know, at this point, this was maybe our third class that we were doing here. So we were still really kind of figuring things out and trying to kind of just learn a little bit about how to use the paint and mix colors. So I think, as you'll see, the paintings get better and better and better and better as we go, as you guys sort of really start. You're not only I mean, the goal of being an artist, or of really learning any hobby, is being able to do things without having to really overthink it each time. Like, if you've ever taken up like tennis or badminton or golf, and you spend all this time just learning that swing, and the first few you just feel like a complete moron that you can't do it, and then you start kind of getting it, and then you're spending less of your time kind of focusing on your body and how you do this movement, right? And I think that's the way a lot of us were over the course of this course so far. Is the first few is just that so overwhelming, all of this stuff, and then it starts to sink in, like how the colors work and how to mix, you know, an orange or a brown, and there's less of that anxiety of how do I do it. It's just like, now how do I do this specific instance of it? How do I get that particular brown? how do I get this particular green, and should it be a warm or a cool green, as opposed to like, how do I make a green, right? And so what's really exciting, as you're going to see, is how things really progress forward here. I'm just super excited. I think what, you know, even when I was making this painting, as I got into it, I'm like, man, okay, there's a lot of detail in this reflection and the shadows here. And some of you guys really went for all that detail. And then some of you guys, let me see, who is it right here? Like Joy here really simplified the detail. And there's no reason why that's good or bad. I think as you'll learn as an artist, sometimes it's important to remove some details because if you have the whole painting just edge to edge full of detail, it's just too much on the eye, right? If it's just like way too much salt in your soup, right? Sometimes you just need to kind of hold off a little bit and let some of the other flavors shine. Very cool. Right? Everyone is different. And we're all starting from the same place, which again, I think is super exciting. So let's go to the Matisse here. Okay, so here's Janet's painting right off the top. What I like here is, you know, Janet replaced, this is originally in Matisse's painting, a black outline or a really dark blue. And I like this change here of, okay, I'm going to add some yellow in its place. I thought that was really smart. Very cool. I like, again, in the Matisse's originally, this is a really dark black kind of shadow. And I was encouraging people not just to make it black, but to give it some other color, maybe a purple in there. And so we have a little bit more purple than black, but I think it works really well. It makes it really pop, probably more colorful than Matisse's. Although I would say that sometimes when you're painting, you don't want to have bright color everywhere. You want to have areas where there's contrast of light and dark. So you kind of want to be careful about having too much bright color in one painting. I think this is great. Really beautiful. Even like these little areas where the color changes inside of this vase, you want it, especially when you're doing glass, we expect lots of reflections and changes of color rather than one solid shape. This here, Madeline's painting, I love this inversion and taking the fish outside of the bowl, and inside the bowl we have the human world where it's full of oxygen, the bubbles coming up here, and the fish swimming around it. I think it's fantastic. I'm not exactly sure what motivated Madeline to do this, but sometimes, you know, when we're working on a painting and it's not turning out the way we want, sometimes we get really frustrated, and there's many famous instances in art history where an artist kind of just starts splattering on the painting and then goes, whoa, wait a second, I thought I was just gonna like wreck this painting, and now I'm really liking where it's going, right? So this is a great example. I'm not sure if that's how she intended, but maybe looked at it and thought, maybe I could do something a little bit different, give it a kind of fun spin. And you'll see a few other places where artists have taken the painting and kind of altered it in a little way, in a fun, playful way. And I think that's, again, really, really exciting. So, just want to see here. Because I've got all of these paintings here by, I'll take a second to download some of them. Let's see if there's any in my emails that I've missed. Oops. Wow, I'm gonna have to do another one of these. where we talk about all the other things that I missed this first time around because of how many paintings you guys sent me. Just want to make sure before I move on here that I've managed to cover all the extra paintings. Do I have another Matisse one in my email here? Oh, here we do have, okay, good. This is why I'm taking an extra little second here. Goldfish. So here's this one is also by Charmé, who we saw a few moments ago with her two versions of Sonia Delaunay. So here's her version of the Matisse's Goldfish. And, you know, really, I mean, what I think is actually really interesting about, I think a number of the ones that she has sent in is how it looks like she's painting on unstretched canvas. Can't quite tell. Or canvas sheets. So there's many different materials that you can paint on, and we'll see this here. We see people painting on paper, we see people painting on canvas panels, we see people painting on canvas, stretched canvas on like this, and then there's canvas sheets. So you can go to like an art supply store and get like a I think I'm sure I have some somewhere, but they come in like a notepad, sort of like your, let me see, you know, kind of like a Post-it note, right? But except it's canvas. So it's just like this canvas material, but it comes on like a big Post-it note, and you can paint on it, and then when you're done, you can kind of peel the sheets off, and often they're kind of just like on a Post-it note, sealed on one side. On some of these are actually sealed on all four edges, so it keeps it nice and flat. And then when you're ready, you just you have to kind of get maybe a knife or something in there to get in, and then you can kind of crack and peel the whole thing off. But it looks like potentially Charmé used a loose piece of canvas like that, just the way it's kind of sitting here, which is interesting. That's another way of also saving a lot of space. The only thing is when you're using anything that has a lot more flexibility like that, sometimes the painting can wrinkle or shrink as the canvas, you know, gets wet, right? So just want to be kind of conscious of that, if that's something you don't want. Because there's also plenty of artists who have done things where the canvas gets all kind of shrunk and stretched and wrinkled, and probably won't do anything like that in our class, but again, that's an option if you're interested in exploring and using canvas in a kind of a little bit of a different way. So let's go to the next one here. So the next series of paintings we'll look at are based on Hilma af Klint's art, right? And that was, you know, for me when I think about this class, that was a big episode, because I think for me that was where I started to think, let's really do this. Let's really, you know, rather than, because I was trying to fit two paintings in the short, you know, hour and a half, 2 hours, which is my original goal for each episode. And then this one I didn't quite finish all the way through, and then I thought, you know what, let's go back and really see if I can kind of finish that painting off. And I spent another couple of hours working on it in the middle of the night. And I think that was like, okay, I'm really getting more and more excited about this class myself. And I think my own painting started to get kind of better from that, rather than just sort of, you know, doing some of the paintings I've done in the past. And I think just my approach and attitude really kind of changed as I got more and more excited about them myself. So here's Gail's. Obviously, we've seen a few of these paintings before by her, and a few we'll see a little bit closer. But I think this was really nice, just seeing them all lined up side by side, right? Maybe you're like me, you've got a big stack of them. We'll see a few people who framed their pictures later on. I would really strongly encourage you to display the paintings you've made in class. Now, we've done 20 or more paintings, so maybe you're not happy with all of them, but I'm sure that you're probably happy with 2 or 3 of them, and then ideally we're going to make another 20 more of them together if you continue with me all the way to the end and beyond. I think I'm getting more and more excited about this, so I think I might just keep on making them infinitely. But I think, you know, having 1 or 2 of these, you know, take one and you set it up in your kitchen somewhere where it's maybe not getting too much splashed stuff all over it, just as a reminder to yourself, like, hey, I can do this. I've done it, and I can do more of them, and I can do this painting again. I could do any painting. I could do them with Michael, or I could also take another image and reproduce it. Because towards the end of today's show, I'm going to show you a bunch of artworks that people like yourself have also made on your own. So new paintings that you guys have made without my assistance whatsoever. And I think that's where it gets really exciting, where you really start like, oh man, I could just make lots of paintings. So here's another painting. This is Charmé again. Beautiful. You know what? Again, what I think is kind of fun is with this episode, if you recall, I began by dividing up the canvas and putting some different colors in the background, which we then painted over with the red, and it gave us a little bit of a different effect. And I feel like this painting was a pretty good painting to use for that purpose, because it actually created this additional pattern in the background, and I think it just made the painting just a little bit more interesting. Not that Hilma af Klint's original painting wasn't good, but I think just for our purpose, so that we can see what happens, because as you know, we started to use this technique more and more and more, of applying one color first, a quick wash on the background, and then painting over it with a different or similar color to really create different kinds of effects. So here's Vanya Elisa's painting, the similar kind of painting, kind of a little bit different, right? We could see these colors coming in from behind a little bit more intensely than right here versus Charmé's, right? And again, this could also be just a byproduct of the way that we document the work. So if you're taking a photograph in a bright room versus a darker room, or outside versus inside, you're going to get different results. But again, once you know this technique, by applying paint, that second coat of paint in a thinner coat or a heavier coat, you're going to see more or less of that background or the underpainting. And so how much of it do you want to leave there? In this instance, I think it works really well. We have a little bit more of this checker pattern coming through, and I think it's really effective. Okay, we'll move here to, we see here's Susan's version of both paintings. And what I think is kind of cool is she's using 2 square canvases for these paintings, so she's had to modify the composition ever so slightly. This painting, I think she's done a fantastic job, and then this one clearly has spent a lot more time really dialing in some of these complicated details. This fine painting, these little squiggles and outlines, not easy stuff to do, but really pulled it off. This makes me really excited. And I also really like, and I think if we go back here, I have to really remember how we did this painting. Yeah, in this painting, we did divide it again into 4, right? But it looks like the way that she's painted it here, that those kind of quadrants are maybe a little bit better hidden than mine. Mine kind of, you can really see these differences. Let's So you can kind of see this kind of very separate line, this kind of a little bit more greenish color or a little bit more warmer color here, versus Susan's on the far right there. You can see maybe a little bit of a change, but I'm not sure exactly how she approached this, but managed to kind of disguise that in a way that makes, actually really like how it's a little bit more pinkish here and then goes into a few different blues. So anyway, all that fine detailing is not easy to do, not at all, right? So if we look at, there's a few here, here's May Locke's version of the painting, right? I think this is really cool. What I like about this is kind of little changes that she's made to this painting. You know, I actually really like this much more brushy quality in here, right? Because the original is very, the way that Hilma af Klint painted this painting is, I feel like she was trying to hide some of those brush strokes. And here May has kind of brought some of them back out. And I think that's a really nice approach to the painting. All right. I think what I would suggest is, it looks like we could see this kind of fine dotted line here. I would say probably using a smaller paintbrush than she used for some of this outlining. And I think that smaller paintbrush really helps get some of that fine detail, right? Because the thicker the brush, the harder it is to get into those kind of fine detail areas here. But again, the colors that you've used, especially this tint going over the background, really effective. Because this is not something that you could pull off. There's no way you could mix this color that we're seeing here, this white over top of, I think it was purple that we had underneath there, or red. And so it just has like a real vibrant kind of quality, kind of glowing. Here's Vanya Elisa's version of the painting. Looks like it's a little bit dark over here just in the photograph, so some of the color might be a little bit off, but I think it still works really, really well. Again, look at all this fine detail. So little exercises like this that we did here, I think you can really see how that pays off later on with being able to do some of these details because in here we're painting an abstract painting. So when you're doing all these little details, if you kind of change things up a little bit, so what? Who cares? Who will even notice? Even people who are familiar with this painting would not be able to notice. But it's like practicing your scales. If you can do it well here, when we're painting some of the other little bit more complex paintings that are featuring recognizable things like people and landscapes, that's where it really pays off. So there is a little bit of method to my madness, kind of starting with some of these images and then building up towards some of the more recognizable stuff. So, you know, these are fantastic. I'm really excited by the results that we got here. Very cool. Wonderful. Okay, so let's continue down the road here. And as you'll see, the quality of your paintings is getting better and better and better. So here's Donna James's version of Suzanne Valadon's cat. Let me see where mine is. I can't even. This feels like a lifetime ago. This is October we did this painting. So here's the version that I did, and again I gridded it out, and we tried applying the same colors here. And I think this was maybe the last time that I did a painting where I was sort of trying to teach you something and you sort of just do a painting over top of it. And then I think after this painting, we started just making the paintings directly and not really using them as exercises so much as trying to create finished artworks as we went. But I think, as you'll see, the results speak for themselves. The qualities that you were able to kind of pull out of just this simple exercise, I think, are really fantastic. So here we have, let me just shrink this back in here. Again, Donna's painting. I don't, what I like is these little flowers that you painted in here, right? Changing the background. All those things are fantastic. Customizing your painting and giving it your own special, unique qualities and details, I think is very, very smart. Because that's what I would hope that you do. That you sort of, as I'm painting, and you're kind of like, oh, you know what I think I need is some flowers here. I'm going to put some flowers there. That's, why not, right? I mean, again, as I stress all the time, your painting has to live on its own after the class is over. So whatever you feel it needs in order to live its own happy life from now to eternity, you need to do, right? So this makes me really happy. Even here, it looks like she's put little kind of stripes or spots on the cat's whiskers, which is really fun, right? And the eyes you've made green. Right. Another thing that I see with this painting is I really feel there's a lot of texture on here. I really feel like there's a thick amount of paint in here. And it really feels like you're working the canvas, you're building it up. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if it's also possible maybe that Donna painted over top of a previous painting, because there's so much texture under here, and I wonder if that's a previous painting that was painted over, or while painting on this was doing some, let's say that this background here wasn't turning out the way that she wanted. Instead of just trashing the painting, she might have walked away, come back, and then reworked it again and made these changes with these flowers, and which I think is fantastic. That makes me really excited, because that's showing me that somebody who's not going to give up, that somebody who sees this challenge, isn't happy with their results, but decides to continue working on it and trying to make it work. And that really is the essence of an artist, is somebody that is just going to grind it out and make it work by like sheer force of will. All right? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, this is Janet King's painting. What a beautiful painting. Really cool. Again, look at the color of the background compared to mine here. Clearly there's a change here with this purple, right? I had just kind of a brown background in here. I think actually the purple is an improvement. I think it really, because there's something, if I go back to mine, I like these areas here, but there is this little bit of repetitiveness, right? There's a little bit of blandness in here, and by that big purple background, just creates something that is different, right? It kind of adds a little bit more spice into that background. I think that was a really smart change that you made. The cat itself is really well painted too. I almost get the sense this is somebody who has a cat. I don't have a cat, so I'm not very up on cat anatomy, so I think you've done a really good job here. Just want to make sure everything's working fine here. Oh, I'm just looking at some of these comments. So people were nervous about today's class. Hopefully the nerves are going down a little bit. Maybe pour yourself a glass of wine and settle in. Peter says chef's kiss. The person who painted the fish on the outside of the bowl and the table on the inside. And Charmaine says, yes, I used canvas sheets. So, let me just see, do I have another painting? I feel terrible that I'm gonna obviously I'm gonna skip over a number of people who sent me their images. I just didn't expect I would get so many of them. So I'll have to do another set of this class. So here's another painting. Here's May Locke's version of the painting. Just like the previous one there of her version of Hilma af Klint, there is a lot of texture here. So I'd be really interested to know how you're getting these effects, because it's working out really, really well. There's lots of artists who will put all sorts of materials onto their canvas and then paint over them. The, what's his name? Now I'm gonna have to Google it, because Julian Schnabel. So I'm gonna show you guys an image of his work here. So Julian Schnabel is a New York artist who became very famous for big paintings. You see that that he made. Like he took all these plates, smashed them, and glued them onto canvases, and then painted over top of them. So I don't know if you can kind of see some of these. Some of these are huge paintings. Like they're, I don't even know how. I'm trying to find some of these. Like he's famous for making these gigantic paintings using, let's see here, like broken glass and other kind of broken pottery. And then, so he became a super famous artist because of like all that texture he put into his paintings. Donna says, I use lots of paint. I love texture in paintings. So that's just one kind of approach. I have tended in my paintings to be a little bit more of a flat painter, and I tend that's just my approach to painting, is I tend to use relatively little texture. But if you're interested in texture, maybe let me know in the comments, and then we'll try to do a few paintings that have a lot more texture. I'll just show you some of the methods that we could use to do that. Because if there's a few of you who really are into texture, then we might as well dive right in and explore it. I think fantastic. I think this is great. The cat, I like the face on the cat particularly. And this color down here is great. This layering of like the yellow over top of some greens and blues has a really vibrant look, and it works really well, particularly on the bottom of the painting. Often on the bottom of people's paintings tend to have like a really dark, because I think people think, oh, that's got to be where the ground is, so I got to make it really dark. But here there's a lightness to this painting, right, which works really well with this cat, which is a happy cat. Oh my goodness, I'm like on the third painting and we're like an hour in. Okay, so you see, I get excited because I want to talk about all your work, but there is so much work to get through, so I'm going to try to pick things up a little bit here. Here's Peter Lee's painting of the cat. And again, everyone did this painting a little bit differently. And what's fun about this one is just the look on this cat's face, right? This is like more of a grumpy cat kind of versus some of these other, like this is a happy cat, this is a very nice cat, right? And this cat looks a little bit spooked, right? And then this cat is not happy, not like, you know. So this is quite funny. I like its look on here, right? And then I see kind of the textures in the back. There's very brushy quality of the layering of the paint here, which is really interesting. I'm wondering, this looks maybe like kind of thin washes over top of here, or maybe this is even some of the underpainting coming through. Donna says, yeah, it's giving you the evil eye. Here's Shelley McCool's version here. These are great. Here, I'm just going to take one quick second to put some of these into a folder. And then I wanted, because I've also got a whole bunch more images by a few other people here. I want to get to so give me 1 second. Oh wow! And the more you guys are sending more paintings. Oh wow! Look at these, cool. Okay, come on. Come on, internet. Wow, whoa. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm trying to get to all the cool paintings you guys have sent me. And I also really appreciate you guys have there's a lot of like really generous things that people are the comments in the chat and afterwards in the videos are really mean a lot to me. It's really you know, it's such a contrast between like, the outside world, and when I look at the news and I see kind of all the angry comments people are shouting at one another, and then all of the beautiful, generous comments you guys are leaving each other in our during and after our classes. You know, it just makes me super excited. What a positive environment that we've been able to develop together. So here's Peter's version of the painting, Shelley McCool here. Wow, look again, like this is, all of this very brushy painting here, especially in this background, is very exciting, because this kind of stuff requires a certain amount of confidence. And I think that's another thing that I see happening slowly as we develop more and more confidence in your guys' approach to making these paintings. I feel like I see you starting to kind of think like, oh, I'm going to take a little bit more chances and a little bit more risks here and there because I think I can pull it off, right? And that's so exciting because, first of all, the stakes are relatively low, right? You guys are painting in your houses. Maybe there's no one else watching you, or you're by yourself. If the painting doesn't turn out, then you don't send it to me, it just disappears and no one has to find out, right? So versus me, if I make a mistake, it's like being, you know, kept on the internet for posterity. But I think we'll talk about that a little bit forward here, because there have been some paintings I've been more happy with than others. Also with this painting, I think what's great is there's a more reddish quality to the painting, and it's this green on this side, which is a very contrasting color. It's on the opposite side of the color wheel, right? When we look at the color wheel, we've got a red and a green going right across from one another, a complementary color. It creates, there's a vibrancy, and because those colors kind of vibrate in our eyes, so literally vibrancies, right? Vibrate, right? So we have like these green eyes and a little bit of kind of warm yellowy kind of colors through here. So that, and you know, at the very least, having this green here and then the green in the eyes is a great way of tying those colors back in together. So this one has a lot of energy going on in here. Wow, That's cool. Oh, Susan Peterson here. Look at this. So speaking of this green, we've got this green in the face and then in a few of these stripes and right next to some oranges and reds and browns, right? So, I mean, these are techniques that have come down to us through primarily, I mean, it happened, I mean, artists have been using it for thousands of years, but really the Impressionists were the artists that really took that idea of contrasting colors and really used them in a very bold way. Obviously, artists had used contrasting colors for different effects, but the Impressionists were the first ones to mash them up fearlessly side by side. And so this really reminds me of the Impressionists, or even some of Matisse's paintings. He did a very famous painting. Is it of his wife? A green stripe here. So we can see this painting here where there's this green stripe going right down the face of his wife. I think it's his wife. And then we can see these kind of, these, like, I was going to say quadrants of color, but not quite, but this big green, orange, and pink, right? And those contrast, really startling contrasts of color, I think work really well. I mean, you don't necessarily want to be doing it all of the time, and it takes a certain amount of skill to pull it off, but in here, these paintings, already you guys are really getting it and doing a great job of doing it. Wow, this is Vanya Elisa, and wow, I love these like solid colors in the face, right? This has almost like a bit of a, a kind of a cubist quality here. And then just this little zip here with the mouth, like zip, 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 right? Those, like doing a little bit of a line like that, kind of right towards the very end of the painting, is a bold move. That takes a lot of courage to do that, because you know that would be one of your final brushstrokes in the painting, and after it would be pretty hard. It wouldn't be impossible to get rid of it, and you could easily just wipe it away. But I think, you know, this is where we want to get to, is where we have a level of fearlessness to attack the canvas in that particular way, and to sort of like, let's just see what happens, and if we don't like it, we'll paint over it. Fantastic work. Look at all these great paintings. So exciting. Okay. Where are we going to next? Oh, Van Gogh. Okay, so we got a ton of Van Gogh here. Not surprising, because, you know, probably the most well-known of, maybe the most well-known of all the artists that we've talked about, or that we've done in class. So, and this was, I'm not sure who made this painting. I sort of just dragged them into a folder right before class, so I apologize, whoever is the creator behind this one. These are, I think, two the same. But one thing that I think you'll see almost invariably between all the paintings you guys sent in is, clearly you guys spent a little bit more time on your skies than I did myself. Not sure why I was rushing so fast, but let's just see. So let's just brighten this up. Right, so in my version of the painting, you could see the size of my brush strokes are relatively large, right? They're about the size of the brush itself, versus many of the paintings that you guys made went in and added like more careful details, and it paid off big time, because that's how Van Gogh painted, and the more of that attention to detail, the more accurate your paintings are going to be. So, and just the intensity of that vibration, because again, not quite using as contrasting colors. I mean, obviously yellow and blue are contrasting colors, but you know, even here we've got like some gray, like a blue gray. I think we had like a blue, cool blue, gray and then a warm blue we put over top of it. So there's just a little contrast between warm and cool of a similar color, and that also creates a bit of a vibration, right? And one of the things with Van Gogh is that optical mixing of color. So, and just like the Impressionists or Pointillists were the kind of the big ones with this. And let's just... So Georges Seurat, or Seurat, I'm not even, never really sure how you pronounce his name, but here's a good version, good, nice close-up here. So he was he's the most famous pointillist painter, is all these little dots combine to create the effect of an image. Just like if you look really closely at a magazine or a newspaper and you see all the little dots and they combine. So there's that optical mixing of the color. In other words, we see the color, the color is mixed in our minds rather than on the canvas itself. Right, so another example where we see, you know, all these beautiful mixing of colors together here. And that's, so this would happen, when was Seurat? He would have been, yeah, so he died right around the same time as Van Gogh died, but Van Gogh would have seen some of his work and was obviously very inspired by that and really kind of took that pointillist method to another level. So rather than just a bunch of dots placed in kind of this random kind of pattern to create an image, he's using those brush strokes to create these swirls and all that kind of stuff, which is super beautiful. Okay. Well, Laura says maybe these are Charmai's paintings. Cool. This is Alyssa. I just got a photograph of her making the painting rather than the finished one itself. But I also thought this was kind of cool. It's neat to see your own setup, like how you guys, where you're painting, what your studio's like. And, you know, for many of you, your studio is your kitchen table or your living room table or your dinner table, right? And or your desk at work, and for many of us, working at home is where we're at, right? So maybe some of you have got some paint on your keyboards and other work tools, but this is really cool. And it makes me so excited that, you know, I think a lot of us think painting, we need all of this, we need a kind of a larger studio that I'm fortunate to have, but I think you're proving to yourselves that you could still make paintings in the relatively small spaces that you may have, and so it helps get rid of all the excuses that we build up in our mind. Oh, I need to have all this room here, and you know, I need like 40 hours to work on it. No, we're making paintings in about a couple of hours, and at the very end, there's not that much of a mess that we can kind of get away with cleaning up relatively easily. So I really appreciate even just these photographs of you guys working on your paintings in progress. This here, Donna James, like, well, as I was just talking about, look at the amount of detail in this sky. Oh my goodness, like, wow. There's so much detail in the sky, it almost looks like it's hand stitched, like a quilt or something. That's fantastic. And then what's interesting too is the difference between the sky and then kind of the bottom down here, the horizon and the hills and these bushes and the village, and then this big tree, the silhouette of the tree in the foreground. I mean, I would say what I think the sky is obviously super effective. I would venture to say this is probably one of the best skies that anybody did, including better than my own. I would say what would be neat is if we could bring this same level of detail into some of the other parts of the painting. What would be kind of cool is to see you try to approach this tree with, you know, obviously keeping it still dark, but even though it's dark, still having like, so because we could see a few different kinds of, like there's this dark blue and then brown and then some red and some yellow. So it could still be very, very dark. It still appears maybe at first to be a silhouette, but when we get up to it, like, oh, whoa, there's still a ton of detail in here. And so that, I think, as a viewer of art, when we see those areas of paintings that maybe in a magazine just look like a dark, you know, solid color, but then when you see them in person, like, wow, look at all that detail. That's what I think would be nice to see, even in this painting here, or in kind of the ground here, adding some little details and swirls. I think you did a better job of the town, this little village, than even I did again. There's a lot more detail in there, and I actually really like this hillside. Really cool. Because this hillside really contrasts well with the sky, right? There's a different kind of movement happening there. Here's Gail's version of the painting. Here, very cool. I really sense the swirl happening here, and then these are really bright. These lights, they're stars, but they just appear so bright. Very cool. And again, really nice detail in the sky, and then this movement. I think this is supposed to be the sun as it's gone way down past the horizon. Here, these sort of like little darker lines over top of that worked really well. Very cool. And then Irene. Wow. So what's interesting too is we almost have like a different, like slightly different point of view in the way that this painting has been painted, with this horizon coming up a little bit higher than some of the previous paintings. It now actually feels like we're coming down here, right? Versus, you know, some of these other ones here, where it feels like we're kind of like on a hillside looking down into the village, right? So we're kind of, you know, there's this tree in front of us, you know, we can almost kind of reach out and touch it, and then we're gonna kind of, there's like a valley and it comes back up, and this town is on the other side of the valley. When we look at this painting, there's a slightly different kind of feel. It feels like maybe we're lower down, and then we're gonna walk up this hillside towards this church and its steeple and everything right here. And that doesn't bother me. I'm sure maybe you're like, oh no, but I think that's great. I think what's fun about even doing any of these paintings is how we can take a super iconic, recognizable painting like this and give it a new spin, like a little bit of a different angle to it. And it just makes this thing that we've seen so many times that we hardly even have to think about it. It makes us look at it again. It makes us look at it anew, fresh, and that makes me really happy. So slightly different kind of point of view and angle and the way this is painted. I really like these colors. Again, you know, I never really thought about this painting too much until we did the painting together. And when I, you know, looking at it, thinking about like, wow, this silhouette of the tree, you know, it's very unusual to put a big dark shape in the middle, in the foreground of your painting, right? That, I can't even think of too many other paintings, certainly famous paintings, in which people have done this. Like usually what people do is they put the darker things in the background and they put the lighter things in the foreground, right, to draw attention to them. Whereas he made a very deliberate choice to kind of have this shape silhouetted against the stars. And I'm sure there's probably people who've written books about it and graduate theses talking about his decision making there. But what I think is even in this version here that Irene did is, even though it's a really, really dark image, we still see all of this built up texture in here, and just these little glimpses of red in there. Works really great. Let's see, here we go. Okay, Iris, Wow. That is cool. You know what this also, again, just the way it's painted, you know, the sky, fantastic sky, great swirls around in the sky, beautiful, and a little bit of a different approach too. Like, it looks like these are a little bit thinner, smaller brush strokes. You know, if we look at mine, I have pretty big, heavy, wide brush strokes, right? Whereas yours have a little bit more, there's a little bit more delicateness to them. And then this little village that we're looking at, even from this angle, this reminds me of, it looks like a little town, and this starts to kind of look like water maybe rather than the hills. Kind of looks like a little tiny town in the Arctic, or in, up near Alaska, like in Haida Gwaii, where my wife and I were a couple summers ago. And you have these little tiny communities that just seem like they're just in the middle of nowhere, just clinging to the rocks on the side of the shoreline. And so that's what this looks like. And I don't mean that in a bad way whatsoever. I try to look at every single artwork on its own terms and just try to appreciate it as it is. And when I look at that, that's the kind of feeling I get, is this little town by itself that is like underneath this gigantic swirling sky. I think that's really cool. A slight, different approach. In the original, I think this is supposed to be kind of the far, like the hill in behind the village. If I look at mine, this looks a little bit more like the hill than it does the landscape than the image by Iris here. But I actually think it works really well. Like, it just, that if you look at the painting on its own and try to strip away the original, all of these paintings, like, they take on their own lives, and they just have, like, I don't know, I just think this is, that's very cool. Okay, so we'll go, wow, whoo, goodness. That's cool. So talk about, so now this looks very different, right? Now this looks like a very rocky hillside in behind here. So this is Janet's painting. Wow, this looks more like a, what does this remind me of? Like a little bit more like of a barren hillside, where it's like Drumheller, Alberta, or something, where we have like a bit of a, just less of kind of a green lush, but more of like a little bit harder kind of a landscape. But then in the sky is just boom, like, talk about a contrast between this little bit more of a hard landscape, but soft, flowing, organic sky. M. Taylor says that Ted Harrison. Yeah, it's got a Ted Harrison. Both the last two paintings, I thought about Ted Harrison. I'm glad you mentioned that. That should be an artist that we do, because I probably already have it on my list of artists, but I'm a huge Ted Harrison fan, and I'm really bummed because I really wanted to meet him, and he used to have an art gallery in Victoria, British Columbia, and he often would be in the gallery painting, and I missed him by one day, and I had to go back on the ferry, and then he passed away before I could come back and see him. But a great Canadian great artist altogether, but definitely a bit of a Ted Harrison vibe with this kind of outlining here. And also, Ted Harrison really, well, maybe we'll talk about Ted Harrison when we actually do a Ted Harrison painting, but really these contrasts between different colors is something he really used. You can see here also a different approach with this tree is a lot brighter. We see a lot more of this green here, and it just creates a different look. Now this feels a little bit less like nighttime and more like a stormy, overcast day, which, you know, some people might say, oh, well, then that's a total failure. The painting doesn't work because it's supposed to be a starry night, and if it doesn't look like night, then, you know, but I don't see it that way. I just see like, okay, here's a painting. What do we think about the painting itself? I think it's cool. I like, there's a different kind of a light to it. And there's even this bit of a glow here in between these buildings that makes, you know, it look like there's, you know, like the life of the community happening here. You know, wow, this is great. Oh my goodness. Very cool. And then here we have May Locke's version of the painting. And, you know, it looks like this painting now is, where we go? You know, the sky, fantastic. I'm really excited. Everyone seems to do the sky really, really well. And what I think is, what I'm most, even though the sky is probably the most iconic part of this painting, and maybe of any Van Gogh painting, and arguably of any painting ever, right? That sky is such an iconic image that we hardly even really think about the ground in this town, the village. Many people have never even noticed that there was a town there to begin with, because they spend so much time looking at the top 2/3 of the painting. But it, you know, again, what I think is interesting is how each one of us approached the bottom, the kind of forgotten part of the painting a little bit differently. I'd also say that, you know, this tree starts to take on a little bit of a different quality. It almost looks like I keep on skipping. It almost looks like there's two people, or like a father and son or something, standing in front of the, you know, it's like you're trying to take a picture and people keep getting in front of you. You're like, just wait until those people move, and you're like, oh, here's somebody else. So it almost looks to me like there's a couple of people standing in the way while she's trying to make this painting. But again, it doesn't bother me at all. I think that's kind of, it gives it a whole different kind of a look. And then this village down here becomes a little bit more abstract as these buildings are kind of look like almost colliding with one another inside of here. I don't mind. I think, you know, she's clearly painting the sky a lot like I painted the sky, with kind of a little bit thicker brush strokes, and it works really well because it also integrates down into here. Whereas, you know, what I would suggest, and this is something for me, even if I was to do this painting over again, would be to have a little bit more variation in the thickness of the brush and the brush strokes. So I think I probably painted almost this entire painting with the same brush. It's sometimes nice to kind of shake it up a little bit and have some thicker and thinner brush strokes in there, and you would use a different brush to do those different brush strokes. But, you know, for 2 hours of painting, I think we all did a pretty darn good job, right? Here's Peter's version of this painting. Wow. Oh, come on, Peter. There you are. So, what I think, let's see, let's bring this back here. So what I like about this feels like there's a lot, like I feel energy when the energy of the act of painting. So this painting feels like it was done potentially faster than any of the other paintings, or that the brush strokes, there's like an immediacy to them, versus like mine feels like it was done maybe a little bit more carefully and slowly. Like the brush strokes are maybe a little bit more deliberate. Here I feel like there's a movement that is just like, there's a lot of energy, more energy in this painting than in my own painting, which I think is great. And it's just one thing to kind of think about is that the speed at which you're painting will also either directly or indirectly kind of influence the way people look at the painting and how they feel and react to it, right? So if you paint very slowly, like the Mona Lisa, which would have been painted over at least 2 or 3 months, if not, in fact, I think he worked on it for a year or more, maybe. But that's a painting that there's a slowness and stillness and calmness, not only to, you know, her pose and her smile. Everything is just, it feels very slow, like there's a meditative kind of slowness. Versus Van Gogh's paintings, there's a lot more like it's just somebody who's got a lot of energy. And here, in Peter's version, there's like almost a franticness, and I can see that it wasn't done in like 10 minutes, because I can see the layering of paint, but there's just like the speed of these brushstrokes being applied here is just kind of gives us kind of you know, it's just the difference between an action movie and a drama or something, right? And I'm not making any judgments, positive or negative, on it. It's just thinking about like when you're making your own painting, what does the painting need right now? And you can have those different speeds in the same painting, depending on what's being produced. Wow. Okay. Look at this. Cool, Sharon. Wow. So, very, you know, what's interesting here, if we kind of zoom in a little bit, is this village too. I get this, especially the way that this little, it's like the red brick road or something, or steps leading up to this building. So, and that leads directly from the front of the picture, right? So we really feel like if we follow those steps, we're going to go right into the front door of this church, right? And a lot of paintings use pathways to draw us into the center of the picture, or into a particular kind of feature of this picture. And so we really see that happening here, where we really, this kind of pulls us right in here. And this, you know, feels like this has got like a garden aspect to it, right? Somebody's planted a whole bunch of vegetables, and then we have like the wild countryside around the edges, and whoa, where are we? And then in behind, in this painting, maybe more so than anybody else's, I feel like more mountainous kind of a background, right? So while other people, maybe it looked maybe more like hills or even water or the ocean, here I feel like this reminds me of Alberta, where I'm originally from, right? These kind of peaks, these mountain peaks. Another thing I think is interesting too is this might be, maybe more than anybody else's, the most dark silhouette of that tree that I've seen, right? It's treated like very, very, very dark, and which I think is great, because it also makes the whole image look more like a nighttime kind of situation here. Like we have, because it's so dark, unlike here, Janet's version, where this tree is more illuminated, it just makes the whole image look brighter, right? It looks like we're at a different time of day than where was that? Than this one, right? And so it's just sort of, again, there's nothing right or wrong with it, but it just does, it feels like a different time, and maybe even a different atmosphere, a different place on Earth. So, and I mean, this, I really feel like that this sky has been worked, and there's actually maybe more dimension in here than in many of the other pictures, including my own, right? I feel this really overlapping over here. I feel like that sky, you know, this band is, you know, I think, which is supposed to be the Milky Way, I believe, in the original Van Gogh painting, really seems to come, is closer to us than some of these stars, which I think is fantastic. So lots of texture built up on there too. Okay. So, wow, that's cool. So this is Shelley's painting. You can see this is done on like a piece of paper, or maybe, I think it's definitely some paper, just because we can see the way, oh my goodness. It's kind of curled at the edges, which, you know, it depends on your own personal approach. I think it might benefit from having a little bit, I think this is the same painting, but just a different lighting. You see how different, you really see how lighting changes a painting too, right? Sometimes if you go to an art gallery and they, salespeople at galleries can do fun things where they dim the light. Some of them have like a special room they'll take you to, and then they dim the light down, and the painting really kind of changes. The best version of that I've ever seen is Thomas Kinkade. I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Kinkade. He's passed away a few years ago, but the so-called painter of light, famous for painting these little kind of villages, and they have like some, I don't know if the paintings themselves have a religious theme or a spiritual theme, but you know, he was like a Christian artist, and you know, again, he's a contemporary painter, just died a few years ago, but also made tens of millions of dollars selling his paintings all over the place, and prints of his paintings. But there's just like I remember going to a gallery. I used to live in Los Angeles, and they give you a private showing. You go into this room and they dim the lights, and the painting really changes. It appears like because there's a lot of little areas that he's painted mixed white into the painting, that as that happens, the painting, it looks like almost somebody's turning the lights on all the lamps. So it goes from like daylight to nighttime just by changing the lamp or the light in the room. Anyway, you'll probably notice that yourself if you have your paintings up in your living room or your house, and you turn the lights off, or you turn on just a little reading lamp. That same painting is going to change a little bit. And so how important lighting can be to your own experience of your artwork and other people's artwork. Anyway, I digress. And speaking of, man, how many more? I'm literally halfway through all the artwork you guys have sent me. So you know what? I think what I'm going to do is, how about let's finish Van Gogh, and then I'm going to do another one of these episodes next week. Just because I don't want to be here for like 4 hours talking about your artwork, and because there's so many other ones I haven't got a chance to organize. I think that would probably make the most amount of sense. So I'll do another one of these episodes so that I give everybody their fair due. Because all those people who sent me images, I really want to share them all here. So anyway, so Shelley's the same approach that I was just talking about in Peter's, or yeah, I mean, obviously very different painting, but the speed of these brushstrokes, I feel like that again, like this swirl feels like it's going fast, like a kind of tornado-ish kind of swirl in the sky, and these kind of quick brushstrokes around here with that looks like a thin brush, very thin, long brush maybe. So we're getting these kind of those marks. Because every type of brushstroke tells a different story. So I really feel like a lot of movement, like even down here feels like, you know, the wind blowing through the grass. Very cool. Banya Lisa, like, wow, look at this green down here. So again, this feels a little bit more I guess you know, I was gonna say maybe it has a daytime quality, but there's something, maybe it's because of the sky being dark like that, it makes it appear still like a nighttime scene, like this is like glowing under the moonlight. Maybe that's what it is. This kind of, it's almost like a glow in the dark green that's been created, I think probably from the 2 layers of paint here. And you know, I mean, what else can I say about I mean, everyone's done these fantastic skies. I think what is just really interesting is how everyone has approached the bottom third of this painting. Well, let me see. Here we have just a few here that I'm pulling out of email. Here's an image by Laura, who I think she's just kind of started the course and has been painting very quickly because she's got a whole bunch that she's just done and sent me them. So, which is really exciting. I think it's really cool to see people who are starting the course, you know, maybe a month or two after we began, and then really trying to play some catch up here. So this is fantastic. What's kind of interesting, you could see the amount of texture. So this looks like there's a number of layers of paint here. Whereas, you know, if we look at mine, right, you could see, we still see a lot of this, the original background colors that I put there. And there's little spaces in between them, right? Whereas when we look at Laura's here, they're like that, there's looks like very little, if any, of that background remains because everything has been painted, right? So there's, we really sense this building of texture, which is super effective. And then this tree is, this is what I was talking about, of having a really dark shape, but still having all those colors in there and the texture. So I think this is definitely one of the more successful trees, more successful in my own. I wasn't too happy with what I did, but this, I think this is really nice. I really feel like, more than any, really feels like this tree, which, you know, certain critics talk about, compare the tree to like a fire, like this black fire, and these being kind of like flames, kind of going up into the sky. So that I really sense that energy here. I also think what's kind of interesting is the way that the village has been painted. There's these kind of straight, you know, vertical and horizontal lines, and then these diagonals. There's almost, when I look at that, I get this like Mondrian kind of quality down here. Mondrian being the, we're not going to do a Mondrian. Well, we could, but that might be after our 40 episodes are over. We could do some Mondrian. But let me see. I might as well just I'm talking about Mondrian. I'm sure you've seen. If you're not familiar with the name, you've probably seen some of Mondrian's artwork in the past. But anyway, I just sort of, when I look at that, I sense just maybe it's, you know, it's the yellow and the red and the blue, but it was almost like a little kind of fun nod to, you know, different kind of era of painting in that little detail. And I would also say that's one of the fun things with art, is often artists kind of do little quotations in their paintings to kind of do, in the same way musicians might mention another artist's lyric, or, you know, have a little quick sound or guitar riff, or even, you know, in hip hop and rap music, literally taking and sampling that same sort of thing over and over again. We see that in a lot of art. And sort of a little wink that artists do to one another, like, to see if anybody else notices. So I like that area down here. I would say there's if I was to make any kind of suggestion here, I feel like I want another color down in here. I feel like I want a little bit more of this brown that you've got, this beautifully painted tree. I feel like I want a little more of that brown to kind of also to darken this here, so that there's a little bit more separation between the sky and the ground. I mean, and I'm just saying that because I think it's a fantastic painting, so how can we make it even better? That's really cool. And yeah, you're right. So Laura was right. That earlier painting, the first one we looked at of these Van Goghs was by Charmet. So, wow. And Donna says, "We are amazing." Yeah, you guys have created so many great artworks. So, you know, we're an hour and 40 minutes in, and I'm literally at painting number 10 of 20. So, I think the best thing to do would be to call it a night right now. And I know it's Saturday night, or Sunday morning, or Saturday morning, depending on where you are on planet Earth. So, what I think is great is, I think this point anyway is also going to be really interesting, because I think from here on in, the paintings start to just take these leaps forward and are getting better and better by leaps and bounds. So what we've seen so far is everyone sort of just getting their feet wet, getting better, and learning the basics. Because I think really the previous, the painting right before that was the Suzanne Valadon, right? Yeah. So really, this painting we made here, the Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, as it's properly said, was really the first painting that we did on its own for no other reason than to reproduce the painting. Because prior to that, when we painted the Suzanne Valadon painting of the cat, you know, we were kind of, you know, using it really as just a way to explore a few different kinds of painting techniques. So this was kind of the midway point of the first half of the course, so the first quarter of the course. And it's maybe a good place for us to end anyway, because this is the point where we really just start making paintings for their own sake, right, and not to kind of learn a particular kind of lesson. And after this we have the Morandi, Carr, Miro, Frida Kahlo, Birchfield, Ophelia Hockney, Herring, Cassatt, Katz, and Warhol. And, you know, even my own self, I feel like my own versions of these paintings have gotten better and better and better. You know, when I look back at some of the early paintings we did, I won't go through them, but you know, I think like, wow, I could do a much better version of that painting myself now. But that's also kind of, I think, how we often feel as artists. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing, is that ideally, the minute you finish a painting, you look at it and think like, okay, that's great, but, you know, I could probably do it better, right? And then if you do it again, you'll be like, okay, wow, whoa, I made the previous one look pretty bad. I gotta, like, look at how, because this is the way that I feel when I'm making my own original artwork, and because I often will make 2 or 3 or 4 paintings simultaneously, and what I'll do is I'll make, and I do that so that I have lots of options, so that if I get to a point and I think, oh, I really like it kind of at this stage, oh, I don't know if I want to do anything more to it, well, I've got, you know, let's say I've got 4 of them I'm working on, the exact same picture simultaneously. I can take one, put it aside, and say, okay, well, this one, I thought I was done right here, so I'm just going to leave it, and I'm going to keep on working on it. And then, invariably, you know, another hour or 2 later, I look at the previous one where I thought it was done, that I would have been happy stopping and like, wow, that looks really unfinished now, like, especially compared to these are, and then I'm like, okay, well, now I'm going to go back, and instead of just trying to make it look like these ones, I'm like, well, now I've got the potential to do something a little bit wacky and wild, and maybe I'll just invert all the colors, I'll paint really fast, or I'll paint very slowly, I'll use a thicker brush or a thinner brush to do similar things, and so now this painting starts going off on its own direction, and then I've got these 3 going off in this direction. And then the same sort of thing, I'll get to a point where, I've got these 3, they're all kind of same, but this looks great, I'm really happy, so I'll kind of set this aside, and then I paint on these other 2 for a little while. And then this one now feels like it's also unfinished. So, that's, you know, I always find, like, as soon as I'm done a painting, I look, and especially if I'm working on other ones, I feel like they could use more work, or I could do them better if I did them again. And that's what I'm going to suggest we do in a few months from now, is try repainting some of our earlier paintings, especially paintings that you're not happy with. Obviously, you know, if you have a painting that you're really, really happy with, trying to paint it again, you know, it's possible that you could make it even better, but it also opens the possibility that maybe you won't be as happy with it, and then you're going to be really bummed out about it. So taking a painting that you've done once and trying to do it again is often very satisfying, because it's going to be better, because you now are further down the road. You're going to approach it a little bit differently. It's going to turn out probably very differently, and you know, at first you might not be happy with it either, right? But I would say I would be very surprised if you were less happy with your second version. In fact, there's more. I think I've got 2 examples where people have done just that. I've repainted the same painting like the next day. Like they did it while we were doing it in class and weren't too happy, so they went back, scrapped it, and then it started a second version, and that painting is just like infinitely better. And so we'll see a few of those. So I think what we'll do is, yeah, originally next weekend my wife and I were going to go away to one of the local islands here, but since there's, you know, the craziness of the world, and I don't think we're supposed to be doing any traveling, I think I'll still be here next weekend. So next weekend we'll do a kind of a part 2 to this, and we'll look at the next 10 paintings we've done, and that'll give everybody a little bit of a chance who's got excited and wants a little bit more feedback on their artwork, to send me those paintings, because I know not everybody sent me some, and some of them I only have a few images, and some of them I got like 10 or so. So let me see which. So like the Keith Haring, I've got a bunch. The Mary Cassatt, I've got a bunch. Alex Katz, Warhol, Hockney, but Birchfield, I've only got 3. So maybe people were a little intimidated by that painting. Personally, that painting that we did was probably my favorite of the paintings that I made myself. After having finished that painting, I felt like, oh, wow, this is like, I've never painted a painting like this before. It's totally different than any painting I've ever made, and that got me just so excited, right? So if you want to watch that episode, make a painting based on that and send it to me, that would make me really excited, because I only got 3 versions of that painting that people have sent me. So I've been chatting for a long time. It's time for me to have some dinner and sit down and play with my daughter. It's been a fantastic, it makes me so excited to see all these great paintings that you guys have made, and I really appreciate the community that is formed. Like all the comments in the chat there, and I'm sorry I haven't got around to all of them. People like saying it's so fun to see everyone's artwork, all these different creations. Great job, everyone. Great to be in the groups. And people thanking me for my Saturday. I'm just happy, you know, to be able to be a part of this community along with all of you guys. So, having said that, let's round it up. And we will see you all on Tuesday. We're going to make another painting. Which painting are we making on Tuesday? Molly Lamb Boback. So a Canadian artist, probably not very well known to even most Canadians. I think that should change, and I'll show you why. And totally different painting than anything we've made so far. So we'll see you guys in a couple of days. Enjoy your time off. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Have a wonderful afternoon or morning, night, wherever you are. Bye-bye, everybody.